How's everybody doing today? We got a beautiful day for our commemorative at the Commemorative event. I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning, getting up early. I want to thank everybody for coming out to all of the events that have been happening since Thursday. And we got a whole lot more events that are coming up very, very soon on the program. And the bucket right there is full of the programs. If you just come in at the first event you've come to, or if you need another copy, we have a number of our programs right there in the bucket. I should say, I'm Mike Flynn. I'm the president of Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. We do this festival every year. In the program, the David Amram Jazz Band show that is scheduled for tonight, the program says it's at Olympia Zorba Music Hall. That venue has been unfortunately closed, and so we have moved the show. The show is at the same time, same show, but it is right over here in Kearney Square at a place called the Back Page, 15 Kearney Square. It's right behind the Blue Talle restaurant. Actually, if you were to follow this path on the canal, the club faces the canal just on the other side of Merrimack Street right there. So it's a beautiful spot for that show. And David Amram is right here, right now. He came into town last night, direct from Carnegie Hall on Thursday night. And we're so glad to have him. And he's going to be speaking in a few. But this is our commemorative at the Commemorative. And this is a time every year in our festival when we get together in this very sacred spot. There was, what LCK was founded for was to create this commemorative to Jack Kerouac in his life, in his work, and that's why we gather here every festival we do. But at this time, we also honor those that we've lost, either from our group or from the greater Kerouac world. So today we're honoring two people who we have sadly lost in this past year. One, right from our own group, right from the neighborhood, our beloved Tom Mansour, who passed just a few months back, and another guy originally from Detroit, but really a citizen of the world, the one and only John Sinclair, who was a very, very big supporter of Lowell Celebrates Kerouac and came up many times over the years. So at first we're gonna pay tribute to Tom, and for that, to kick that off, I'd like to bring out Steve Eddington to say a few words.
Hey, thanks. How's that? Okay. Thanks, Mike, and welcome on behalf of Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. A couple things I'll add to what Mike said about the spot here. It's a very special place. In some ways, you could say this area where you're standing here is the birthplace of Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. The LCK was originally formed to create and build this here. They had a dedication ceremony for it in the summer of 1988. And I don't know if any of the people who put that together envisioned we'd still be doing it 36 years later. But here we are. This is the 36th annual Lowell Celebrates Kerouac Festival. And during that time, a lot of things have happened. This organization has come to mean a lot to a lot of people, including myself. I think I'm coming up on about 30 years with my involvement with it now. So it's been a very important organization. This has been a very important place for people coming to Lowell to seek, to honor the legacy, the life and the legacy of Jack Kerouac. Well, I just said that, excuse me. I said this organization has come to mean a lot to a number of people over the years, and I know one of those persons who we're honoring this morning is Tom Mansour, one of our committee members. Pleased to have with us Tom's family, his wife Carolyn, daughter Kathy, and Senator Kennedy, who will be speaking in just a few minutes. So yeah, this past June, those of us on the Lowell Celebrates Kerouac committee, we lost a friend, very devoted committee member, Kerouac aficionado, all of that when Tom Mansour passed away. And we know his passing, of course, was felt well beyond us at Lowell Celebrates Kerouac, by his family, by his friends, those who knew him, and so many of the various aspects of his life. And yet as we gather here and surrounded by writings of Jack Kerouac's words, we especially want to honor what he brought to the Kerouac presence and legacy here in Lowell. It was Senator Kennedy, from whom we'll hear in just a few minutes, who suggested to me and to Mike Flynn, our president, that his friend Tom was interested in being a part of Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. So we invited him to our next meeting, and Tom really took hold right away. His delightful presence, some of the stories he told with that resonant voice of his willingness to roll up his sleeves and work when it came to doing the things we need to do to keep the Kerouac flame alive and burning in Lowell, including all the details that need to be attended to one of these festivals from year to year. All of that endeared us to Tom right away, and I think he was endeared to us as well. We also knew early on in our time that Tom was struggling with some health matters, especially with his heart, other things. He was being treated at a rehab center over in Haverhill back last spring and early summer. And hope was that his body could be brought to the point where other treatments having to do with his heart could take place, and very tragically that did not happen. But my last time talking with Tom is one I'll always remember quite fondly. I was on my way to Boston, took a side trip over to Haverhill to check on him with the facility that he was there. And Tom was his very cheerful and upbeat self that morning. We talked a bit about how his treatments were going. We shifted to lighter matters like how the plans for the festival here were coming along and what kind of a year the Red Sox were going to have. I guess that's enough to say about that. Well, in time, one of the staffers came in for some rehab work for Tom, so it was time for me to leave. He gave me this smile and a wave as I left the room. And then it was just a few days later that Mike let me know that Tom had passed away. And as sad as I was to get that news, I'm also carry a bit of gratitude in me for that last image I had of Tom before I continued on his way and left his room. I think that captured the essence of who he was very well. That smile and that wave as I walked out the door. So thanks, Tom, for all you gave to Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. We'll remember you long and well and appreciate you for it. Like I said a couple of minutes ago, it was Senator Ed Kennedy who got Tom linked up with us at LCK, and we're grateful for that. We're also really grateful for the great support, both as a former mayor of the city as well as a current member of the Massachusetts State Senate. We're really grateful for the support, the help that he has brought to Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you very much. On windy days like this, I think that sometimes I end up looking a little bit like Bernie Sanders. But anyways, it's an honor for me to be here today to pay tribute to Tom Mansour. Tom has been, besides, Tom and I lived in the same neighborhood, but also he is a member of the group of guys that meet every Friday night to drink beer and talk about the matters that have gone on during the week, which are usually confined to sports, rock and roll music, and politics. Although in the past couple of years, we've expanded that to talk about our own physical ailments as we get a little older. Tom was always an active member in each of those conversations that we would have. And the two things that I remember most about him are, one, just how proud he was of his daughter Catherine and his son Christopher. And a lot of times he would tell stories about them, and you could see that he was bragging a little, but he was very proud of them. And I just remember him for that. The other thing I remember is I always thought that Tom should also have a second job as a restaurant reviewer, because almost any restaurant in Massachusetts, in southern New Hampshire, or even southern Maine, Tom would have been there. And if you say, well, Tom, how is it? He'd say, oh my God, the prime rib is to die for. So he was a great guy. We've all missed him. Paul Saunders and Jack McWilliams from that Friday night group are here. And I also brought along a Senate citation. Massachusetts State Senate official citation. Be it known that the Massachusetts Senate hereby extends its congratulations to Tom Mansour in recognition of being an outstanding citizen of Lowell and a prominent member of the Lowell Celebrates Kerouac Committee. And be it further known that the Massachusetts Senate extends its best wishes for continued success, that this citation be duly signed by the President of the Senate and attested a copy thereof transmitted to the Clerk of the Senate. So thank you all very much for being here. Carolyn and Catherine, it's good to see you today, and let's enjoy the festival. Tom won't be here in person for the festival this year, but he certainly will be here in spirit, and actually he'll probably be hanging out with Jack Kerouac, and hopefully not adopting some of his bad habits. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ed. Really appreciate you being here. Appreciate you getting the citation from the Senate. And yeah, I'm maybe if Tom and Jack can be in some kind of communication, he'll be asking him how he thinks the festival is going this year. And let's hope Jack says, well, I'm liking it. They're keeping my life and legacy alive in Lowell, and he would thank Tom for being a part of that as well. I'm going to ask if we just take a couple of minutes, and David, maybe you'd like to play a little something for us as we just take a few minutes to reflect on the life of Tom Mansour.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for, I'm not from Lowell, but I appreciate it and love it. I'm a newcomer to the festival. I came 30 years ago, 1994. But Jack and I did the first ever jazz poetry readings, and I was due to come last year, and my daughter said, "You look terrible." So I went to urgent care, and they said, "Well, you're doing fine. You'll be 94 this November, but you have COVID." I said, "Oh, no." I said, "Well, suppose I just go in the corner so I don't give it to anybody." They said, "You might die." I said, "Uh-oh." And then I got this wonderful thing that John, who I've known for years, wrote, and what for Senator Kennedy, and some other people had those up on my wall. And I got, instead of expiring, here I be, and getting my health back, and I want to thank everybody. Mostly, just to play something I played, Jack and I usually at 2 in the morning, and on occasion, I would play little short demon variations on Amazing Grace. So I want to thank all of you for coming and remembering Jack Kerouac and the city of Lowell, Massachusetts, where we're blessed to be. And a special place, there's no place in the world where they have an author and his books have excerpts in stone where people can come by and see what he was really like. And that hasn't changed, and it's still Lowell, and it's still Jack Kerouac, and we can hope it'll stay that way forever, just as his books do. It's a little Immigrations on Amazing Grace. I hope the wind doesn't blow me out.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. So we honor and we bless the life and the memory of Tom Mansour. At this point, I'm going to hand things back to Mike as we shift to the second person whose life we're honoring this morning, John Sinclair, who became very much a part of our festivals over the past year. So, Mike.
Yeah, so many of you know John Sinclair from Lowell Celebrates Kerouac festivals. A lot of you might know John Sinclair from, other means. The guy had just one of the most amazing and storied careers in the underground, so to speak, of just about anybody I could think of. But he was a gigantic admirer of Jack Kerouac. In fact, last year when he was here, during a couple of the 3 readings he did last year in October, he said, I can't tell you how much I appreciate Jack Kerouac. I'm nothing without Jack Kerouac. And one of the reasons for that, he always said, was because of Jack Kerouac and David Amram staging the first jazz poetry reading in New York City, which basically became John's raison d'etre. 2 things that he was supremely passionate about were jazz and poetry. And a third, of course, was baseball. Now, I first met John in 2012 when he came up to a Lowell Celebrates Kerouac festival, and he was doing a featured reading, and David was up that year as well, and there were a number of different things going on. Rick Bro brought him over to WUML, where I do a radio show every Saturday. I've been doing that for a little over 13 years now, which is the university station. I do a community show there every Saturday from noon to 3, which my predecessor, Tracy Milton's going to be filling in for me today. But Rick Bro brought him over, and that was where I met him. Those 2 came walking into the studio, and I looked out through the glass, and I saw Rick, and I saw John Sinclair. I said, I can't believe this guy's standing right on the other side of the glass, and I just waved, come on in. They came in, and he handed me the CD he had just made the year before called Let's Go Get 'Em, that he had recorded in one basically 48-hour-long session in a place called Café de Zen in Amsterdam. And he told me in the interview that we did, I said, I love the cover art. And he said, that was painted by Frenchie, Randy Leo Frechette from Lowell, Massachusetts. And I said, this is Frenchie's work, because I had seen Frenchie's work, and I had actually seen Frenchie at the Golden Gloves doing live painting. He live paints music. He's a giant artist known in New Orleans for live painting music and sports. But he was originally from Lowell, Massachusetts. Now, and that's where I first became aware of the connection between Frenchie and John Sinclair. So it was like, oh my goodness, not only does John Sinclair have this Lowell connection with Jack Kerouac, but he's got this Lowell connection with this guy who's just a couple years older than me and really grew up around the same time I did. So I felt a special kinship with him. In addition to that, John really appreciated the fact that I did a community radio show. And I wasn't aware of, I knew he had Radio Free Amsterdam, and I knew he was doing internet radio, but I had no idea how far back John's roots in both jazz and radio went, back to the 60s in Detroit with the Detroit Artist Workshop and putting jazz on the radio and celebrating it in a way that we celebrate Kerouac here in Lowell. So he's a guy that I met that was sort of a legend in my mind. And then when I met him, I found out I have so much more in common with this guy than I just right now, you know what I mean? And he was one of those people. He was larger than life, but 100% down to earth. And his poetry is where it really, his spirit just came out. He did his last poetry reading here last year at our festival, and just a few months before he passed. And he had been ill, and he had been confined to a wheelchair for a couple of years. But when he got in front of a mic and that voice came out, you would never know that he had any type of infirmity at all. It's a pretty amazing thing. But with that, I'm going to conclude with that, because I'm going to invite David back up to share some thoughts on John Sinclair. I know they had a lot of different collaborations over the years, and I also personally know from the first day I met John Sinclair in 2012, because David came over to the radio station that day too, and I literally had both of these guys in the studio for close to an hour and a half, and it was just one of the most amazing experiences I could have had at that time. And it's kind of a funny thing too, because the next night at the poetry reading when David was playing with John introduced his poem, Let's Call This Rhythm Inning, which sort of is why I mentioned how he was a giant sports fan. He does this poem to a Thelonious Monk tune, which basically puts like the history of jazz as if it were a Subway Series baseball lineup. Right? He said, well, I wouldn't do this one today because we did it on Wireless Mike's show. And David jammed and we did it. It was a great recording. As soon as we finished, I said, Mike, that's great. Did you record that? And he said, ah! Because I was so in awe of these guys coming in, I forgot to record. When we went to a break, I got the last 45 minutes of the hour and a half that we were in there. But and another funny story about John, and that year at the AmRam Jam, I think we were doing it over at the Brewery Exchange that year. It was also the year that the Detroit Tigers were in the playoffs. And it was John's turn to read. And I think it might have been Mike Worm or it might have been Cliff Whalen who, somebody said, hey, somebody go get John, it's his turn to read. He was outside of the room where we were doing the AmRam Jam, and he's at the bar. And they said, John, you got to read. And he goes, it's your turn. You got to go read poetry. He goes, poetry's every day. The Tigers are in the playoffs against the Yankees, and they won. They made it. They got swept by San Francisco in the series that year, but what are you going to do? But anyway, with that, I'm going to conclude my remarks and invite up, again, Mr. David AmRam to give some thoughts on the late, great John Sinclair, who just passed this past April.
I'll keep this mercifully brief so we can hear from your family. Just for those of you that, if you haven't read Jack Kerouac, which is not a federal crime, although they're begrudgingly including his work in just about every English department in the country now because his books are so terrific. And one of the people that read his books and really appreciated the feeling and the message, not the cliches that came when the third string critic of the New York Times gave it probably the best review in history. Everybody jumped on the gravy train, on Jack's gravy train, and then they jumped off of Jack's gravy train after he committed the greatest crime in American culture of falling out of fashion with the New York intellectuals. They couldn't stand the guy that looked like a boucheron. Ça, c'est l'expression française des... That's a French term used in Quebec for the wood choppers. And when Jack, as you know, became overnight at 35 a worldwide celebrity, he wasn't probably the only person we knew who didn't want to be a rock and roll star or a movie star or a celebrity of the month. He was a writer. He always used to say, I'm a writer. Why don't they read my books? Now, all these years later, he left us in '69. They are reading his books. One of the people that read his books and appreciated the spirit of that and the spirit of Lowell, Massachusetts, where people from all over the world came in order to have a little better life, kind of the American dream personified, like New Orleans and parts of Manhattan, Queens. You could see and hear different languages. Jack loved that, and he included on Moody Street, where he heard the jazz plays, and his friends that he had, called the Young Prometheans, he and the Sempus family. Just a handful of people really loved the classics of literature. And John Sinclair was the same way. He was, he got famous for being put in jail. And by the time we had a committee to sign to let him hopefully get out of jail, he'd already served a great deal of time. But he read Jack's books and loved them, and he got the picture and the message of all the things that Jack was writing about, not to freeze a moment in time, but just understand that there was no such thing as the Beat generation. Jack was not a leader of anything, And a lot of people leapt on his gravy train, jumped off the gravy train, and then came back when he got fashionable again. He was more than that, and John Sinclair was more than that too. And while John also got kind of a bum rap as being known as the person who was the head of the White Panthers and went to prison and produced rock and roll concerts. He did all those things for sure, but he did a lot of other things too. And if you get a chance to read his poetry or hear his records, he was extraordinary. He got that spirit, and he kept that spirit going, not with the idea that he was the only one or he was the leader of anything. It was just him telling his story, his own way. And that's about as Lowellian as you can get, that a city like this enables people today. If you ever go to the high school poetry meetings and hear these young kids whose families probably don't even speak English reading their poetry. Jack used to say, and also John said, if you got caught in school holding a book of anything, even from the Greek poets in your hands, or Shakespeare, you get beaten up. Now here's a bunch of kids in Lowell, Massachusetts, reading their poetry in English and applauding one another, and just being taught in schools. And I hope that John Sinclair's work, and I'm sure it will, eventually will crash through the Ivy League academic channels and be taught in poetry readings so that college students can get a chance to see what a lot of high school students now are reading, his beautiful work. And it was described so well by Mike. His baseball poem with Thelonious Monk, Bud Powell, Sonny Rollins, Charlie Parker, all playing on the same baseball team, was phenomenal, and a great history of jazz as he saw it on Moody Street as a kid, and music that has helped to form and change the world. He understood that all of us, the so-called Beat generation, were really recipients of a gentility and down-to-earth, for real, no BS, regular folks that everybody is, until we discover Bigfoot or illegal alien. We're all just people hanging out together for a while we're here. And John personified that, and when he finally got his recognition at the end of his life, he never became a stuffed shirt or blew off anybody, whether it was a 7-year-old saying, I want to read you one of my poems, or someone older than him that wasn't recognized. He was cool with everybody, just a wonderful friend, a wonderful role model, and someone who understood where Jack was coming from in a deep spiritual way that enabled him as a totally different person to bring some of Jack's work and spirit and this place to a larger audience. So it's wonderful that he's being honored, and we all honor him as well as someone who was a true believer in what we all believe, or we wouldn't be here this morning.
All right, thank you, David. Thank you to State Senator Kennedy. Thank you to Tom Mansour's family. Thanks, Steve Eddington. And thank you guys all for coming out for the commemorative event this morning. There are a couple tours that are going to be leaving. I didn't check the time. Oh yeah, so we're still a little bit early. The bus tour will be leaving at 10 a.m. It pulls up right here along the side. And the walking tour is also going to be leaving at 10. Bill Walsh is right over here, and he will be leading the walking tour. So if you're taking either of those tours, they'll be departing shortly. And we have a whole bunch of great events going on all throughout the day. Got a number of events taking place over at the Pollard Memorial Library. Paul Marion is going to be doing a book talk on his book Portraits Along the Way at 11 a.m. And then at noon, we have a panel or like a book discussion on Jack Kerouac's book Pick, and then the Library Haunts and Hooky Tour. Got the open mic, 4 o'clock, and then of course David Amram's jazz band is going to be playing this evening right over at the back page. So a whole lot of fun stuff. And the Parker Lecture, how could I forget? We had 2 people.